is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host, Smitty. Be sure to follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. And while you're there, or actually, no, not even while you're there. Sorry, I was about to go into the Rocket Around the 412 spiel.
Hey,
I can't do that anymore. It's a force of habit. I've been doing it for the past 4 months, so I apologize for that. But we gave a longer thank you. So if you listen to our Steelers episode, you can hear a longer thank you. It was about 6 minutes long. We'll try to keep it a little shorter for this one, but we just want to give another thank you for everybody who was involved, whether you shared the GoFundMe, donated, adopted a tag from the Salvation Army for the East Rochester Salvation Army Angel Tree. Any way that you guys gotten involved with Rocket Around the 412 year 6, we just want to give a big thank you. And I'll actually let Smitty give the totals, because he did give the totals on Twitter of the 6-year totals, but we did promise after last week that we would have a 6-year total. So I'm kind of putting Smitty on the spot really quick, but I'll let him share those totals. But we just want to give another thank you for everybody. We were able to raise over $6,000 this year, able to help 10 children across 3 different families from the individual family side of things. And then was it 26 kids off of the Angel Tree this year for the Salvation Army? So again, huge progress this year. I mean, that's amazing. The numbers are amazing. Being able to make that much of an impact, it starts with everybody that gets involved. So we just want to give a big thank you. And Smitty has the totals for the 6 years, which is actually nuts, because like we say it all the time. Like when we started this, like we raised like around $1,500 the first year. Didn't think it was going to be like growing into like that big of a thing. Obviously, we would have wanted it to, and it's growing bigger than we thought, and we want to continue to grow it. But after 6 years, it's been awesome.
Yeah, so I actually broke it. I didn't put this on my post, but I broke it. I had to figure out year by year first and then add them together for what was in the post. So the first year you were right, $1,537. That was the year that we just we donated to that 24/7 pediatric center in Aliquippa. So it wasn't the exact same type of thing. And then after that, we started doing the individual family stuff. But yeah, since 2018, when we started the mission, $32,325 raised, 39 families helped, 41 Salvation Army Angel Tree tags taken, and provided Christmas for 96 kids in total in that time.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. I mean, those are mind-boggling numbers for me.
Now I'm just mad that it wasn't 100 though. Let's see that 96.
96. Yeah. No, I get that, but it's amazing that we've even come close to impacting close to 100 kids over those years. And again, that goes back to all of you. So big thank you to everybody that's gotten involved in 412. Year 6 is done. It's done for this year. 2024, it will kick off in July, which I know seems like a long way away, but then again, July seems like a long way from now, but it seems like it flew by for us talking about Rock Around the 412. So anyways, we'll get into the show, but also we do still have the Everything Custom Design links. Our friend Haley Wagner, she's got her small business for clothing. We're getting pretty close to Christmas time, so I don't know how much longer she'll be able to take some like Christmas orders, whether that is Christmas merchandise as far as just regular clothing goes. I know she's doing customized Santa stockings and Santa sacks. If you want to decorate your kids' Christmas gifts in a Santa sack, something like that. She's gotten some stuff like that going for Christmas. So I don't know how much longer that it is, but she has an Etsy link and a Facebook link. We've got both of those on the listening platform description and on YouTube. So go check that out as well. But this is the Penguins episode. Let's get in some hockey. We've had 4 games. We decided to split up because normally we record all our episodes on one night. We're splitting up our episodes so we have some more hockey to talk about. And I'm really happy we did, because if we only had to talk about the 2 games from last week, I would have been pretty upset.
Yeah, a little bit better taste in your mouth. Also, this is like as many possible hockey games as we could have in between episodes, doing it like this. So, I'm also glad that we waited. You mentioned 4 games. So Lightning and Panthers, that Florida trip that we had mentioned on the last episode. And then they come home to face Arizona before heading back on the road to go up to Montreal to face the Canadiens, which they're still in Canada. They play against the Maple Leafs in Toronto on Saturday. But Yeah, looking back on this entire stretch, going back to that Florida trip, it looked like more of the same. The power play continued to struggle in those two. You weren't getting much outside of your top line and goaltending, and that was a stretch of hockey, a continuation, if you will, of the stretch of hockey that they've been on for the better part of the season. When you look at those two games, actually, I'll just pull them up right now so we can take a better look at them. The loss to Tampa Bay, they lose 3-1. Jake Gensel scores a goal with like a minute left to break the shutouts. They lose 3-1 to the Panthers. It's Reilly Smith that scores against his old team, but not much else going on besides that. Just 27 shots on goal, just 5 shots in the third period, while trailing 2-1 in that game. They weren't able to generate anything to try to come back. Lost in the faceoff circle, went 0 for 3 on the power play. Not much of anything going on in that Florida trip. But, they come home, take care of business against the Coyotes, winning that one 4-2, and then win a shootout, a 12-round shootout against the Montreal Canadiens on the dad's trip, the first half of the dad's trip taking place at the time of recording this last night. There's this little 2-game stretch, and again, taking into consideration who they played here, the Coyotes and the Canadiens, and the way that they looked in these games. Any chance at all for you that this maybe provides a little bit of a spark and they can start to play more like they have over the last 2?
If anything, I think it provides a spark for the power play, and we saw several power plays goals,
4 power play goals
in these 2 games. Because leading up to this, including the Florida trip, unless I've miscalculated, I believe last week when we were talking about it, they were 0 for their last 29, and then you add 0 for 6 on that Florida trip. On top of that, you're talking 0 for your last 35 on a power play. Their last power play goal up to that point was on November 6th, and so. If anything, as far as sparks goes, I think this will light a spark for the power play, just because we talked about it. It did feel like if they were going to get one, it felt like it was just they were going to get more after that, which is kind of what we saw. Like you said, we got 4
for 8
goals in those attempts, just between the 2 games, regardless of the opponent. I think that was just an important thing for the Penguins to do, because it almost just felt like not only were the fans not believing that they were going to score a goal on the power play, it felt like the team just maybe they obviously they were still trying to score, but it almost felt like they believe like, man, our power play just really sucks right now. Like we can't get anything going. And so I think that kind of played into why it felt more lackadaisical at times with them trying to get stuff on the power play, because it's almost like these guys don't even have faith in what they're doing either. But then finally, Jake Gensel scores the power play goal that gets the dam breaking, and we get 4 power play goals in those 2 games. I think that is probably more important than anything, regardless of the opponents that they were playing, regardless of the outcomes. The fact that they're able to score on the power play again is, think about how many times in this stretch, especially in the stretch where we've been losing a ton of games over the past 3-4 weeks. Think about how many of these games were 1-2 goal games that could have been flipped on their heads if we have scored 1 or 2 power play goals in these games. And how many times were we walking away from games where we go 0 for 3, 0 for 4, 0 for 5 even on the power play? I think that's something that's huge for the Penguins, something that they're going to succeed with, is because when you look at the way the team's constructed, we talk about the construction of this team all the time. They are built to score with top-end talent. And top-end talent isn't just when you're playing 5-on-5 and it's your top 2 lines. It's also when you're on the power play. When you look at the construction of the roster and you look at the power play individuals who's starting on the power play, you have a power play that should be scoring at a pretty high clip, at least on paper, just because of the talent that you have on it. For some reason, that wasn't the case. That has not been the case for a long, long time. But that's how this team is built to score. And if they start chipping in on even just like 1 or 2 of these opportunities a game, I think that's going to pay dividends moving forward with the Penguins. That would have kept them in a lot of these closer games, because a lot of the games, the Penguins haven't been getting blown out in every single loss they've had over the last 3 weeks. They are getting into 1 or 2 goal games. Sometimes an empty net is scored. Sometimes they lose in overtime or the shootout. I think that being able to score on special teams is going to put the Penguins in a better situation, because you're not going to be digging yourselves into a hole, because anytime there's a power play outside of the last 2 games, you knew that they were not going to score. And so if you went 0 for 4, 0 for 5, that's just sunken opportunity that you were wasting away by not scoring. And that was putting the games even more out of reach because you weren't taking advantage of the opportunity to use that high-end talent that your team is built upon to be able to score. I think if you continue to do that and continue to score in the power play, like I said, if you just get average 1 power play goal per game, I'm sure at least some of these games that we've been talking about that we've been losing are at least being more competitive in the third period, if not going to overtime, if not the Penguins are winning.
Yeah, I can think of like 4 right off the bat that I feel like the power play was the difference, at least between them, at least getting a point. Now, would they win in overtime? I don't know. But like a lot of 1-goal games, they went 0 for multiple on the power play. How much of this, and I want to get your take on a certain player just recently brought up and put into a relatively prominent role, and I think he's looked good. Puustinen, Valtteri Puustinen brought up, and he's played on the top power play unit. Obviously, Sullivan was looking for a way to kind of shake up those units to provide a spark, and it has, 4 for 8 on the last 8 power play attempts with him being on that top unit. And he has points in his first 3 games this season. What do you make of Valtteri Puustinen's, I don't want to say emergence, but the role that he's played here so early in his time in terms of just being brought up? And do you think it's sustainable?
I think that he's in a good situation. Like, he's not a player that's going to be brought up and put on the 4th line just because they're bringing up a new guy. He's playing on the 2nd line with Malkin and Reilly Smith, being able to be on the first power play. I feel like there's certain players that even though they are an AHL guy who would quote unquote just should be like put on a bottom 6 role because they are newer to the NHL, and that's just kind of how the pecking order works sometimes. There's certain players, and like there's another one that's in the organization that we've talked about that hasn't necessarily panned out how we would have liked, but like I relate it to like Alex Nedeljkovic, where they have a certain skill set where you don't think it's going to work as well in a bottom 6 role, in a 4th line role, and being in a certain situation where they could be in a top 6 role and they could be on a power play. That is more so the skill set that I think Puustinen should be in. And that's the kind of skill set that he has. So I think that's helped his opportunity that he's gotten since he's been called up to the Penguins. I've liked what I've seen from him. I'd like to see it in a larger sample size. It's hard to go off just a couple games. But this is somebody that the Penguins fans for the last, not even just like this past season, but a couple seasons have been clamoring for. I'm sure Taylor Haas has been thrilled about having questions about him for the past several seasons. But I think
if Jeff Carter can be sent down for him,
and if Jeff Carter can be sent down, well, I'll be sure to ask her after this. But I think that that's somebody that if the Penguins are going to have someone come up and work out at the NHL level, Puustinen would be a great one to have that happen for, because he's one of the only prospects in your organization that we've been talking about that has had any promise, like any sort of upside. I know Kyle Dubas has his work cut out for him when it comes to rebuilding the Penguins farm system, but to have Puustinen come up, and granted it's only a couple games, I think that it's good that he's looked good so far, and I want to see over a larger sample size what he continues to do so, because he could be someone that is filling in a role where even if guys start to get healthy, like whenever Brian Rust does come back, that could be a guy that carves out a role and stays at the NHL level. I think that that's kind of what we've been talking about too, where we have so many guys for a couple spots on this NHL roster, mainly talking about the bottom 6, and that's something that we've been talking about, retooling, where you could get a lot of these guys into different roles there just to kind of shuffle it around and see what fits the most. Puustinen might be a guy that sticks at the NHL level because of his performance that he has, and is someone that is a blessing in disguise, that he started even if he starts in the 2nd line role, and then whenever Rush comes back, he moves down to a 3rd line or 4th line role. That might be something that the coaches realize, hey, like this guy needs to stick around. We need to bump some of these other guys that aren't performing as well off of this bottom line and see how this guy does down there. This is a player that I want to do well. It's one of the only players like him and I guess Sam Poulin, as far as forwards go, those are really the only 2 that you're really banking on as a Penguins fans to have any sort of upside at the NHL level. Sam Poulin is still hurt, so you're not going to get anything from him as of right now. So to have Puustinen come up and perform the way he has, it's been nice. I just want to see it over a larger sample size.
I've already seen, I think, more from him than I've seen from even Nylander, like in his time up here, certainly over Sam Poulin, who I think has gotten overtaken. I would say, I know that he's not playing in Wilkes-Barre yet, but if we're just looking at the prospect pool as a whole, like Braden Yeager is still doing really nice things for Moose Jaw. It seems like every time I go on X and look at their social media page, he's got some type of highlight of the night up there. So that's been encouraging. Hopefully that translates over here to Wilkes-Barre sooner than later. And then we get him up here because, yeah, like you mentioned, very shallow prospect pool that they have here. So they kind of need Puustinen to work out, not just short term, but also long term. You kind of answered my question because I was going to say, like, what role do you envision him having then? Like you mentioned Brian Rust, but also Ricard Raquel is going to be back into the fold. Probably before Brian Rust even gets back, Ricard Raquel will be back in the fold, who is skating with the team right now, just not doing like, contact and those things yet, but that would be the next step. And then of course, returning to game action. So, logically you're thinking he moves down in the lineup though. Drew O'Connor's created some really nice chemistry with that third line. But to your point, Valtteri Puustinen, like, does he offer that same type of role to be able to fit in like the fourth line capacity? I don't know. I feel like if he's not playing up in the lineup, what is his role and is it valuable to this team?
I feel like he would, just looking at how our centers are constructed right now, I feel like he would prosper more having Malkin as a center than a guy like Lars Eller. And that's basically just because of fit. That's not like a slight to Lars Eller. I just think that as far as play style goes, skill sets, I think that he's best suited to play up on a guy like that. So even if, say, Rust and Raquel do come back, maybe you flirt with the idea of like having Rust on a third line role. I know that might be an unpopular opinion, but he's someone that has had the versatility to go down. I mean, he started his career playing in the bottom six for the Penguins and then worked his way up. I think that that's something that could work out if Puustinen continues to play well. If he doesn't, obviously circumstances change. But if he continues to play well in the opportunity he's getting, I wouldn't really want to screw things up. So that's why I would be more willing to try out Rust on a third line potentially.
Well, too, I mean, before he got hurt, Raquel has been in this season-long scoring drought up until the time he got injured, and he got moved down to the third line. Is that something that they flirt with even when he comes back, seeing how he fits in with, Lars Eller and maybe Drew O'Connor or whoever that other wing might be on the third line?
I think you get really weird with it, and you just put Raquel back up on the top line where he should be, in my opinion. And then you have Drew O'Connor and Brian Rust and Lars Eller as your third line, and then Puustinen, Reilly Smith, and Malkin as your second line, and just see how that rolls.
Yeah. Well, and to be he has, I will say, these last couple games, I think he's been more noticeable, drawn a few penalties. I don't know that I've seen enough from Radim Zahorna to continue to throw him out as a regular every night, when everybody gets healthy. Because like right now, you don't have Noel Acciari, you don't have Matt Nieto, and whether those guys deserve to have roster spots or not, you figure they're going to draw back into the top 12 forwards when they do come back. And then, I'll be honest, we might as well talk about it with what he's done over this stretch of 4 games since recording. Jeff Carter scored a couple big goals. I'm not saying that I expect this to continue or anything like that, but, they maybe don't win this game without what Jeff Carter gave them. So I don't know. I think that you continue to, with the way that this season has gone and every point being so precious, and as much as there's just this muddied area with the bottom 6 where everybody just kind of seems like they're basically the same player, you just kind of got to ride the hot hand, in my opinion. So if you have guys producing at the time, don't mess with it. And I think that can kind of be carried over, even though he's playing in a top 6 role right now. I would categorize Valtteri Puustinen along with those guys as being somebody competing for a job at the bottom 6.
Absolutely. And I think even guys like Vinny Hinostroza and Harkins, I think they've done some good things in their roles as well, in the opportunities they've had since guys have been out with injury. I don't think anybody in this bottom 6 should be guaranteed a spot, no matter what your contract is, how long of term you have with the Penguins, anything. I think that
Lars Eller's the one. Right,
Eller's the only one that I don't think is going to move from his spot at all. Everything's just going to move around him, whether whether that's the two wingers on either side in that bottom six roles or the center below him. I don't envision Lars Eller ever changing. He's the only solid piece of that bottom six.
And to his credit, and low bar here, of course, when you look at what the Penguins did this past offseason, I think he's in, I mean, at least for me, and I'll get your take here in a second, he's probably in their top 3 free agents. Well, no, I was going to include Carlson because of an offseason acquisition, but then I would also have to include Reilly Smith. So never mind. He's like right there because you have Carlson, Reilly Smith, and then Nedeljkovic has been really good as a backup goalie. He
Carlson
bounced back
trade,
nicely
though.
after going back.
So you could just say free agent.
He's definitely been one of the top 2 free agents, I would say. But if I'm including trades, like I would have to include Carlson, I would also have to include Reilly Smith in that. So if you're taking the offseason as a total, I think it's Carlson, it's Reilly Smith, and it's probably Nedeljkovic, but like Lars Eller is right there, in my opinion. And that was the signing that I hated the most out of the ones they made.
Well, and then that's the guy that when we did our X Factors, when we gave our like a little awards for the season, that's the guy that I said was my X factor because I mentioned that you look at when the Penguins have been good, they've had a good third line center.
Is always important.
Obviously, I'm not saying Lars Eller has been Nick Bonino, but I do think he has been an upgrade over what they've gotten at third line center recently. So from that and from a consistency standpoint, I feel like out of the way he's been playing over the season too, I don't think that he's had an overall like hot and cold stretch. He's been fairly consistent the entire way.
And imagine if you do give him a winger like we're talking about, whether it's Brian Rust or it's Rickard Rakell when they're healthy, along with Drew O'Connor, who now has kind of gotten to go up into the top 6 and get some experience with them and maybe bring that down and see what he can start cooking with a third line. I don't know. You're giving him probably more talented line mates than we envisioned him having at the beginning of the year as well.
Well, and if you're the Penguins, if you're Mike Sullivan, right now you are second to last in the Metro. And granted, you are also 6 points out of being second in the Metro. So take that for what you will. I mean, it's still early in the season for standings. But as far as you're concerned, you're fighting to get back into playoffs. You're fighting to get back into the Metro race. I feel like it shouldn't matter who's playing where, who's playing over who, as long as you're playing your best 12 forwards, your best, I guess, 19 guys, because technically the backup goalie's on the bench. I feel like that is the best way to go if you're Mike Sullivan, Kyle Dubas, and the Penguins. I don't think that you should be so stuck in your ways that you refuse to put, say, for example, Rakell or Rust on the third line, or you refuse to keep Puustinen in that top 6 role whenever guys like that comes back. I think no matter what, you should put yourself in the best case scenario to improve your team, because we missed the playoffs last year. We're fighting to get back there. I don't think that you should be prideful over what you think should be done, because obviously if it's similar to what we did last year, it's not good enough. So you need to change that and adapt to what is going on actively on the ice and actively this year. And obviously these last 2 games, they figured something out that they hadn't for a decent stretch.
Yeah. I agree. And, speaking of Nedeljkovic, that's actually where the last thing that I wanted to talk about was because I put out a post yesterday during the game that said very clearly we weren't getting the best version of Alex Nedeljkovic. He didn't have it that night. And after they went down 3-1, boy, did he turn it around, because he was fantastic the rest of the night. And he's been really fantastic when you consider his role on the team too. Like, they're obviously just asking him to take a little bit of a load off Tristan Jarry and just be that. I don't know if I'm curious as to how much they need him down the stretch, right? Because right now he is kind of just playing as like a normal backup goalie. But I really feel like the Penguins are going to be smart about this, knowing Tristan Jarry's health and the way that they've kind of managed him in the past and how it's kind of burned them, and go to a more like 1A, 1B down the stretch. That's at least my hope of what I'm thinking. And based off the results that we're getting, every time he's between the pipes, I feel just as comfortable regardless of which one is on the ice.
Yeah, I think that you're getting the Nedeljkovic that you saw. When was a good one? Was that Carolina when he came in there?
At least he was out of his. Yeah, he was out of this world in Carolina, but playing in a better like system too. So I think you could argue right now this sample size. I know this might be crazy to say based off the numbers he was putting up. It might actually be the best hockey that he's played in the NHL when you consider what like the defense in front of him as well.
Yeah, I mean, on the season, he's at .935 save percentage. And in that game that we just had, where we went, also, to go 12 rounds in a shootout, by the way, or was it 9 rounds? I forget
12,
how many.
12.
12 rounds in a shootout, and to have your goalie put up a performance. Obviously, he let in a few goals, but that's going to happen. It's a shootout. To go 12 rounds and have the performance that he had in the game itself, because he had a .929 save percentage in game when it took on over 40 shots. I think that was an impressive performance. He's been impressive overall, and this is something that we really talked about this offseason, because we knew you couldn't go into the season with the same goalie tandem. You could not sell it to us that we were going to go in with Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith again. And he's been just as adequate, definitely more of an upgrade thus far too over Casey DeSmith and what we had as a backup goalie. And so, yeah, I'm well pleased with him. I don't feel in the slightest uncomfortable whenever he's between the pipes. Whenever we roll him out there, I'm perfectly fine playing our backup goalie, because I feel confident that he's going to be able to make a save. And that's something that I couldn't really say for a while. And even I can say that for Tristan Jarry too now, and that's something I couldn't say about him for a while. And so being able to have trust in our goalies again, and even if they do get shaken up a little bit, I think that's even more of a confidence booster as what I think about him as a goalie. Because you mentioned like your tweet and the Penguins going down 3-1 early, like to be able to bounce back from that, kind of shake it off and have a quick or a short-term memory about that, and be able to put the performance you did and then have the shootout performance you did. Hats off to him. I think it's been great. And I think as far as like the usage goes, I think that could be smart for them to know that going towards the playoffs, like maybe you do go more 1A, 1B, just because health has been such a factor with Tristan Jarry in these playoffs. I mean, last year you didn't even make it. The year before that, Tristan Jarry played in 2 games in that, or 1 game of that playoff. And so I definitely think that could be the case. And who knows? I mean, obviously things are going to happen. It's hockey. You might end up seeing Nedeljkovic in playoff games as well. If we do get that far, we
might see Magnus Hellberg.
We might see Magnus Hellberg. I mean, we did see Jeff Zatkoff once upon a time in Mr. Game 1.
Louis Domingue?
Nobody. Don't say that name. Nobody knows. we need some what was that, broccoli and the spicy pork sauce or
yeah
something
spicy,
like that.
Was it pork or beef? It's pork.
It was pork. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's pork.
Yeah. Broccoli and spicy pork.
Definitely pork.
Yeah. But you're going to see goalies.
Okay.
So it's nice to have some guys that can actually play well, or at least showing that they're playing well. I don't have to question it.
Yeah. I was just looking if the Penguins are not good in overtime or shootouts, really. I know they just won in the shootout, but like it seems like since it went to 3-on-3 and in recent memory, the Penguins have just not been good in those situations. I was about to say, like, I see that they've earned at least 1 point in 7 out of their last 10 games, which is good. But like it's 4-3-3. If they can find a way to actually win some of those games that go, past 60 minutes, that they'd be in good shape. So, hopefully they start to do better like they just did against the Canadiens in those situations.
Well, and that's what I was talking about too. Even just to kind of go back to what I was saying to add to this is like before the game against Arizona and Montreal, we had like a 12-game stretch where we went 3-9, and obviously not great. But looking at some of these games and including empty net goals, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What did Florida score an empty net? No, we scored late. So we're talking about 9 of the 12 games before an empty net goal was scored being within 1 goal, if not ending as a 1-goal game. And so that's where I go back to my original point, and where we can kind of wrap up things up to is like going back to the power play. If they capitalize on more of these power play chances, they're going to be in more games, which will actually either send them to overtime or maybe even not even have to get to that point. There's a lot of close games that had to be won, but they were not going to be in contention because they were 0-4 on the power play in every single game during that stretch.
Yeah, and speaking of stretches, we could take a look ahead here. They got Toronto, like I mentioned, on Saturday. Minnesota, which has not been, I'm surprised because Minnesota, you always feel like pretty steady. They're pretty consistent. You expect them to kind of always be in the mix. Right now, they're 10, 12, and 4, 7th in the Central. So they have not gotten off to a good start this season either. And I assume we'll probably record before that Hurricanes game. So we might just have those 2 games to talk about next week.
Yeah, probably, because then you don't have a game until Thursday. So
right,
there'd be a gap between Monday
Hey,
and
then look at that date. Look at that date on there. It's gonna be right before Christmas by that time.
That's true.
Crazy. Time's flying. But yeah, Toronto and Minnesota, 2 very different opponents. We've already seen them match up pretty well against Toronto. Hopefully they can do that again. That was a fun game. That was one of the more fun games of the year. You know, Toronto I think they have similar warts to their teams. I think that I don't know that they're a bad defensive team, but similarly to the Penguins, they struggle to defend in zone. As long as they can keep people in front of them, I feel like they're okay defending in transition. But once the puck's in their zone, it seems like they have trouble tracking the puck and keeping guys, from in front of the net, similarly to the Penguins. So it could be like a high shot volume game between the two. So I look forward to that one for sure. Then Minnesota might be the complete opposite. Total snooze fest where the goalies steal the game and it's like a 2-1 game or something like that. But we will see. Anything else?
Notable things about the 2 games coming up. Both goaltenders in Minnesota were at once either Penguins or in the Penguins organization with Gustafsson and Fleury. So you're just going to have a Penguins matchup in goal. And then this is Kyle Dubas's first game back coming up on Saturday back in Toronto.
That's right. Yeah, the first meeting was in Pittsburgh. So
yeah.
And Spezza. I'm sure he'll travel too.
Yeah. I wonder how much they'll get booed.
I mean, I feel like the fan base that not necessarily ill will towards them.
Still,
maybe I don't know.
It's Toronto.
I feel like
suck.
The
fans.
I'm
suck.
curious. I'd be curious on that. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what the reception is like. But anyways, like Tyler mentioned at the beginning of the show, we do have still the links for the Etsy and Facebook of Haley Wagner, our friends, small business, everything custom designs. As we sit here recording right now, we got about 2 weeks until Christmas, 2 weeks till Christmas Eve right now. So maybe you can still get in for a stocking or a Christmas sack order or customized pajamas or any type of clothing. So hit her up, get at her for something like that. What I'm tapping right now, this hat, any hat, can't happen. Not through Haley Wagner. So everything custom designs can do a lot of different things, but we call her everything but hats. Custom designs is a joke for a reason. No hats. Sorry, folks. But hit us up at Around the 412 on all social media platforms. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Leave us a 5-star review if you are listening somewhere else. For Tyler, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 412 Penguins show, and we'll be back next time. Bye-bye.